Teddy Roosevelt was born on October 27, 1858, in New York, New York, with the parents of Theodore Sr. and Martha Bulloch Roosevelt. In 1870, his father helped founded the American Museum of Natural History. In May of that year, Teddy and his family went on a trip of Europe. 2 years later, his family goes on another trip, including Egypt and the Holy Land. During that time, he collected animal specimens to bring home with him. A month before returning home, he receives a shotgun for his 14th birthday. In 1876, he begins going to Harvard University and then publishes his book, The Summer Birds of Adirondacks. During February of 1878, Teddy's father dies of stomach cancer. About 8 months after the tragedy, he meets Alice Hathaway Lee. 2 years later, in 1880, he gets engaged to Alice and graduates from Harvard. He then marries Alice, enters the Columbian Law School, and joins the Republican Party. Roosevelt is then elected to the New York State Assembly. He is the youngest ever elected to office. Teddy's first major work was published in 1882, The Naval War of 1812. Months after, he joins the National Guard and is commissioned a second lieutenant. January of 1883, he is elected the Speaker of the Republican Assembly and heads to the Dakota Territory to hunt bison. In 1884, his first child, Alice Lee Roosevelt, was born. After receiving a telegram that his wife and mother are ill, both of them pass away. 6 months later, he begins going on a hunting trip to the Bighorn Mountains. After a couple more trips, he returns home before Christmas and writes his first book on Western experiences. 2 years later, in July, he gives a speech in the Dakota Territory as the orator of the day. The next month, he goes to Montana to hunt mountain goats. And in that same year, he married his second wife, Edith Roosevelt. The year after, Teddy's first son, Theodore Roosevelt Jr., is born at Sagamore Hill. In the years leading up to 1891, he has published many more books. In August of 1891, his daughter, Ethel Carroll Roosevelt, was born at Sagamore Hill. 4 years after, he resigns the Civil Service Commission and becomes the Police Commissioner of New York City. He is then elected the next day as President of the Board of Police Commissioners. In 1897, he publishes The American Ideals, and his son, Quentin Roosevelt, is born in Washington, D.C. The following year, Teddy sells his first cattle interests at outbreak of Spanish-American War. He then joins the 1st U.S. Volunteer Cavalry Regiment. Once 1900 comes around, he is elected as Vice President in November, even though some saw this as a position that would end one's political career. However, the following year, McKinley is shot, which makes Roosevelt the youngest president to hold office. A year into his presidency, he begins antitrust suits to stop monopolies. In 1904, he is re-elected as president. He then establishes national parks and different monuments. Teddy is awarded a Nobel Peace Prize. In 1909, his presidency ends. In total, he established 230 million acres of land. Teddy then accepts another Nobel Peace Prize and returns to New York from his African safari. Before Teddy gave his campaign speech, he got shot in the chest, but still continued. In the years leading up to his death, Teddy published more books, traveled, saw his 4 sons enlist in the military, his daughter become a Red Cross nurse, and was there for his youngest son's death. On January 6, 1919, Theodore Roosevelt passes him asleep at Sagamore Hill at the age of 60. Teddy Roosevelt was part of the Progressive Party and helped pave the way for future progressivists.